Hey, Daddy, this is the man of the champions, Bill Fonzie Alfonso, giving a shout out to
Something else.
something else, Daddy.
This is Nicole Matara, Great Warrior Wolf, and you are listening to Something Else.
I'm Tony Cini, and you're listening to something else.
Hey everybody, it's Rich Palladino, the voice of New England, and you are listening to Something Else with Aria.
And welcome to episode number 192 of Something Else. Feast your ear holes on this week's episode as we take a look at NWA Total Nonstop Action, episode number 45 from May the 14th, 2003. My name is Aria, and joining me, as always, is the Ron Harris to my Don Harris. It's Cindy. Cindy, you were on the show this week almost as much as the Harrises are.
I wish I wasn't. Good Lord. Welcome to Miserable May, ladies and gentlemen, guys, gals, and non-binary pals. Episode 2 of Miserable May. It's worse than the first one.
The battle of who has the bigger dick between Vince Russo and Jeff Jarrett behind the scenes is ongoing, folks.
And the quality of the show suffers greatly because of it. So, if you weren't with us last week...
Mm-hmm. First of all, why the hell not? Go back and listen to the damn show, cheapskates.
So, we had a really great opener, and it nosedived from there. To the point where we actually gave out a 0 for the first time in, 4 months?
Oh, it had to have been more recently than that. I'm sure that Moondog Spot and Jim Duggan tag match, I'm sure got a 0.
I think I gave it like a 0.5.
Which, by the way, that match included Mike Sanders and main event Glenn Gilbertti. The same main event Glenn Gilbertti, who is the #1 contender to the World's Heavyweight Championship. All right.
It's amazing how much changes in 2 months.
So in the battle of whose dick is bigger this week, Vince Russo's genius plan for this week was a match between, let me scroll down. It was Kid Cash versus Conan was the originally scheduled match. And Jeff Jarrett's like, no, motherfucker, and changed it to the match that we get, which is Kid Cash versus Ron Killings with Conan on commentary. So it's almost as if Jeff Jarrett had a better idea of what the hell to do, since one match would obviously be a lot better and still lead us into the next angle that they're going to do.
I would agree wholeheartedly there. I think Conan versus Kid Cash would be just... We would be counting down the minutes to, okay... When is the Masked Luchador Spider person going to show up to put us out of our misery?
It may be time to quit the show if I'm watching Conan versus Kid Cash. So elsewhere in this week's battle of whose dick is bigger, the current plan, as ordered by Jeff Jarrett, is to have all big angles and matches culminate in a 4-week build. So this way, every week has something that has had a 4-week build, and we'll see how long that lasts. Elsewhere, a group called Phase 3 Media had sued TNA for $56,000 because they designed the original logo and apparently demanded $56,000 for it. Now, the original logo was the block letters that said TNA in gold, and it was like surrounded by red. That apparently cost $56,000. Stop for a moment and think that over. That a child could pull up Microsoft Paint right now and make something amazingly similar to that. That cost $56,000.
Wow.
You wonder why this company was almost out of business in August of last year. By the way, the lawsuit was settled out of court for an undisclosed sum.
I'm gonna guess 30,000.
I'm gonna guess a free subscription to fucking Photoshop. Jesus Christ. And also this week, and this solves some of the weirdness of this show, Sabu no-showed the event this week. He was in Chicago and refused to go any closer to Nashville. And we'll get to this, but it does explain the random weirdness that the Harrises later on in this show get told to go find them, go find Sabu, and they never find Sabu. And it's the Nashville Fairgrounds. There's not a whole lot of places to hide. On to the show.
What about the attendance? How many people paid this week, or do we not have those numbers?
We don't have a number except that it's mostly papered.
We'll say 300 then.
I'd say at best 300.
Yeah, all right.
So, main event Glenn Gilbertti arrives at the arena in a limousine and tells a cameraman to follow him the rest of the night. It's that kind of show here, folks. Glenn walks into the arena at the same time Eric Watts shows up and arrives at the arena. Nothing happens. But hey, it's at least good to know that somebody arrives at the arena on time, since we're used to Jeff Jarrett showing up 45 minutes into the show.
See, that's why Glenn Gilbertti's a leader. He shows up on time and at least attempts to put in the work, I guess.
Or at least it's better than the time Jeff Jarrett had a charity event to go to on Wednesday night between 8 and 10 p.m. And then still showed up for the final segment.
Yeah, I don't get that at all.
So in the ring, where Cindy's favorite wrestler, Ace in the Hole, Sonny Siaki, is standing there with all of Sports Entertainment Extreme, and he introduces us to our number one contender, main event Glenn Gilbertti, who comes out wearing the nicest suit he owns. In the grand tradition of Harley Race, Dusty Rhodes, Lou Thez, Ric Flair, and Colorado Kid Mike Rapada, this man could be your next world champion. Glenn then decides to redo the first big miss of the NWO angle, where they announced that anybody can join the NWO for 30 days. Glenn Gilbertti apparently thought that was a good idea and announced that anybody can join SEX for the next 10 seconds, which, by the way, nobody joined in those 10 seconds, but we'll see throughout the show that that does not mean that nobody joins SEX.
Right.
So this brings out the Extreme Revolution. New Jack cusses at Disco. Disco says he wants to talk to the Sandman for some reason. And between New Jack and the Sandman, I'll be honest, I'd rather talk to the Sandman too. And so a Pier 6 breaks out and SEX gets run off. Okay. So this is, by the way, keep in your brain the number of times I mention Triple X or the Heresies on this show. You know,
If you decide to take a drink, you will die.
yes. This is not the show for the Harris brothers drinking game. So tonight, we're going to have an exclusive interview with Jeff Jarrett. I know CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News all tried to get this interview, but luckily the NWA TNA cameras, they were able to pull some strings to get the interview that every news outlet in the world really wanted to get. We're also going to have Amazing Red versus Chris Sabin for the X Division title. Hold on. Hold on a second. Last week, Jerry Lynn said that he was going to get a match for the X Division title this week against Amazing Red. And you may notice Chris Sabin is a lot of things, but he is not Jerry Lynn. And we're also going to have Triple X versus AJ Styles and D'Lo Brown for the Tag Team Championship. So at the very least, it sounds like we're going to have two good matches this week.
Yeah, on paper.
Yes. Now, backstage, Goldilocks is interviewing Chris Sabin. Now, it is 2025, and you may think to yourself, Chris Sabin does not get very much promo time in 2025. I wonder why that is. And then, anytime you've ever heard Chris Sabin cut a promo, you understand why he does not get very much promo time. However, if you think he's bad at promos now, holy Jesus, you should see it back then. Jerry Lynn walked up and informed Chris Sabin that this is going to be a three-way dance. Okay, then. All right, so then we get our opening match, which is X Division Champion Amazing Red versus Jerry Lynn versus Chris Sabin. It is not explained why Jerry Lynn petitioned for this match to be a three-way instead of the singles match that he was promised before. You would think if he just wanted to have a singles match for the title, he'd just say, okay, I'll take on the winner. But nope, not Jerry Lynn. We can't have that. So Red and Sabin are still, super young, super green guys. And the story of this match basically, while they would occasionally work a spot with each other, 99% of this match was one of them working with Jerry Lynn, which made for a much better match than, if we would have let Red and Sabin just wrestle each other for 12 minutes.
Yeah.
Triple X wandered out and just stared at the ring at one point. Lynn lifted Sabin onto his shoulders, and Red hit a springboard hurricanrana to Sabin, which was fucking phenomenal. And it's too bad that TNA has a nice little 23-year history of not letting teams stay together very long, unless James Storm is one half of them, because Lynn and Red would have been a hell of a team. And they also, Lynn and Red, and I know you're shocked that Jerry Lynn was a good worker in this match. Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red did a hell of a job of subtly stopping each other from winning. They never broke up each other's pin, and attention was never called to it, but they always managed to cut each other off just before they would go for the pin. The finish sees low-key distract the referee. Daniels pulls Lynn out of the ring. Skipper gives Red the play of the day, and Sabin gets the pin to win the title. In Chris Sabin's third match in the company, Chris Sabin is your one-time X Division champion of the world. Now, first of all, I know we're going to do the BS. Oh, the referee was distracted. Bullshit. But we had constant interference in this match, and there was not a disqualification like there was last week for the tag team titles change hands. Then after the match, Low Key gave Chris Sabin an SCX t-shirt, Sabin put it on. So Chris Sabin, who apparently missed the cue to join SEX, 20 minutes ago, is now a part of SEX. Now, yes, this is another TNA pay-per-view starting with a really good match. However, whose Cheerios did Red piss in? Was he pissing in Russo's and some splashed out into Jeff Jarrett's Cheerios or something? Because motherfucker, they spent months delaying him winning the title because he always have Japan commitments or this, that, or the other thing. But finally, they get the day and Red wins the title. And it's such horseshit the way it happens. Much like the way they won the tag titles, I remember, wasn't the greatest finish either. But
No,
either way,
wasn't either.
they,
But at least that was a
yeah,
great match.
yeah. He wins titles on 2 consecutive weeks and then immediately loses both of them in 2 consecutive weeks. Why do we need to kill his momentum? Why can't we let somebody just get fucking over? And, oh yeah, the fucking tag title match, that was when they won, then got their asses kicked and needed Jeff Jarrett to come save them. That was the finish of that match.
And then you have Red win the X title, but gets dropped on his head by the masked luchador.
Well, it was also the fucking match where the masked luchador drops Kid Cash on his head. Amazing Red crawls over for the cover, and then 2 minutes later, the referee wakes up and free.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, Lord. What the fuck?
So let's move on. Goldie's with Extreme Revolution, and they are kind of angry that Sandman wants to talk to Glenn Gilbertti to try to make peace or something. Saturn, New Jack, and Just Incredible try to talk sense into him, but it's Sandman. No sense has been given since 1994. So now we head over to...
They also, and it's important to note this, they also say that if Sandman gets his ass kicked, they're not going to try to help him out at all. So, yeah, just keeping that in mind as the match. So to the SCX locker room where everyone is hugging Chris Sabin and Glenn books Mike Sanders versus Mike because he has to do. Glenn then tells Ron and Don to go beat up Sabu. Oh my God. Kid Cash then arrives and says that he does not want to be on the list of people against SEX and offers them a peace a peace offering in the form of Trinity, who when we last saw Trinity was getting her fucking ass kicked by Kid Cash last week, and now this week is informed that she is being given up to SEX as a sex object. And we literally cut away with the implication that these 6 or 7 grown-ass men are going to gang rape Trinity. And we immediately cut away from that. And the fact that, it was technically never resolved, nothing ever came of this, so we're to believe that they all just took turns on Trinity. And they ran on her. Any thoughts on this?
I'll have more thoughts on this when we get to this next part of the Trinity in the sex locker room segment, because we'll get there. The next match is Mike Sanders versus Mike Awesome in a battle of which Mike will stick around for longer than 2 months.
In a
By the way, it's
table
also
match, by the way.
Yeah, it's also a tables match.
Yeah. But by the way, the key to this match is they have tables set up all around ringside. And so when Mike Awesome grabbed Mike Sanders and fought with him into the crowd, Mike Tenay and Don West informed us that Mike Awesome was doing this so he could find a table, which buried Mike Awesome as being a complete dumbass for not seeing the minimum 4 tables set up around side the ring. Anyway, the Harrises, Slash and Brian Lee all run in and start fighting. Triple X makes their 4th appearance on the show, making it 5-on-2. And while that happened, a wrestling match was happening. And the wrestling match wasn't much better. Anyway,
No, it wasn't.
main event, Glenn Gilbertti runs down and hits Mike Awesome in the head with a chair, which causes Mike Awesome, who was standing on the top rope, to fall backwards through a table, and Sanders beat Awesome. Not the worst Mike Sanders match we've ever seen. Does this mean
No.
Mike Sanders is actually getting better?
I guess.
3.0 out of 10.
Wow, you really like this match more than I did. I gave it a 2.
I don't know if I'd call that really liking it better. But
Right. I also wrote down this time, this is the point where I ordered dinner and I had spicy chicken teriyaki for dinner.
I bet that even if it sucked, it was better than Mike Sanders versus Mike Awesome.
It was at least 3 times as better. I would give it a 6 out of 10.
Mm-hmm.
So we have.
I think it sounds like a quality dinner then.
It was a quality dinner. Well worth the money that I paid for it. So Goldie is backstage with Chris Harris. Rather indignant about Chris Harris's. So you want to ask me a question? Well, let me answer the question before you ask it. And he's angry at the people trying to split up Chris Harris and James Storm, which just stands to reason. And he pointed the finger at David Young, so he's going to try to beat David Young up tonight. Now,
why not?
Yeah, exactly. So let's talk about, now here's where, the Trinity stuff comes full circle.
But before we get there, I was honestly shocked that Triple X or the Harrises did not walk in on that Chris Harris promo.
I think since they're feuding with each other.
Anyway, just move on. What are you talking about with the next segment?
All right, so we go back to the sex locker room. Trinity is there. And Glenn wants some alone time with Trinity. So he tells everybody to hit the bricks, including Sonny Siaki, who's a rather... All right. And before Glenn talks, we have once again the Eric Watts saying Eric from WCW is coming to be the new authority figure in TNA.
Yes. So yeah. Let's just say this. So there was no real fucking closure to the stupid Trinity thing. Ron and Don Harris couldn't find Sabu, but they said they found the next best thing. Julio and Alexis. So yes, the next best thing to Sabu are the followers of Raven. Makes perfect sense, doesn't it?
Makes perfect sense, I guess. Glenn did say Raven was on the top of the list, so stands to reason why he would grab the Gathering, because maybe they might know where he is. Spoiler alert, Raven doesn't show up this week.
He's probably in Chicago with Sabu. Anyway, we then get Kid Cash versus Ron Killings with Conan in our second straight heel versus heel match, which was set up by Cash being racist. Conan joined the announce team and they needed to turn his fucking mic up. The one thing I did manage to hear was Conan saying that Kid Cash was gay and liked taking it from behind. So during this match, I was trying to figure out who is actually a babyface in this company. Raven is a heel, and all of the Extreme Revolution turned on April 23rd. Jim Mitchell and his folks turned heel in March because they were snubbed by the Sandman and Saturn when they wanted to team with New Jack. SEX are heels. Jeff Jarrett is a dick. AJ and D'Lo turned from babyface to heel to babyface to heel to babyface and back and forth again. Chris Harris is a dick. Conan and Ron Killings are heels. Chris Sabin just turned on this show. And that leaves Amazing Red, Jerry Lynn, James Storm, and maybe Sabu as the only baby faces on this show.
I will not put Jerry Lynn in the face pile.
Well,
because he's been acting like a fuck as well.
So
Trinity?
the Heresies beat.
Can we count Trinity as a face?
I don't count Trinity as anything.
Wow.
The Heresies beat up Conan because I guess he apparently looks like Sabu. And at this point, I note that Ron and Don are up to about 5 or 6 appearances themselves tonight. Ron and Don beat up the Truth, which was not a disqualification. The Masked Luchador, who still has a nice rack, laid out Kid Cash, which was also not a disqualification. And Killings won. What the hell is going on this show? 4.0 out of 10.
That's exactly what I gave it, 4 out of 10. I mean, at least the Truth won.
Spoiler, like the next 3 matches, my rating is 4.0 out of 10. Just gives you an idea of what we have to look forward to.
And that's
so the
saying
Sandman,
something given the main event.
The Sandman finally went to SCX for the meeting they set up an hour ago. Siaki was there instead of Glenn and offered Sandman a beer, which is the best way to do it. David Young made the worst run-in ever as he somehow hit Desire with a Singapore cane. Sandman and Siaki proceed to fight into the arena and into the upper section of the arena, and Sandman kicked his ass from one side of the fairgrounds to the other before finally getting into the ring, where the Heresies made their 7th appearance on the show with Mike Sanders. And remember earlier when I said the Extreme Revolution wanted nothing to do with the Sandman if he gets into a fight during this meeting? Well, the Extreme Revolution ran in for the save, and we had a huge brawl. Jeremy Borash tried to help out by ringing the bell repeatedly. It did not help. Sandman then took the mic and demanded a match with main event Glan Gilbertti. And I note they wrestled at least 3 times for the WCW TV title, and now they are going to get to semi-main event to pay-per-view. They are no Booker T and Scott Steiner. We must tell you that.
Yeah.
So up next.
So I gotta say that I'm happy for Saturn. Like, it's because I'm actually liking Saturn during this run. I just wish he sticks around longer.
Well, apparently they were not a fan of him and Mike Awesome's weight, and they wanted both men to lose a bunch of weight. And yeah. And it's funny because Mike Awesome is losing weight. He's lost weight since his first night on.
Yeah.
Anyway, up next we had what ended up being the exclusive interview with Raven. I just wrote it was a video package on Jeff Jarrett, an interview with Jeff Jarrett, excuse me. as there was a video package on Jeff Jarrett talking about his various injuries, and it's like I was just zoning out because he's talking. This is this is not the first time because I guess the first segment on the first show buried TNA, but this was the second time at least on this show they've talked about how WWE is so much bigger and better than they are, and that you can't be the number one company in the world if you don't have a number two company in the world. So thank you, Jeff Jarrett, for pointing out that your company is lesser than. By the way, it's not even the second time because we've seen multiple times on this show them talk about how much better WWE is. You know, WWE, the show that you can watch for free twice a week, actually 4 times a week, if you include Heat and Velocity, instead of paying $10 a week to be told that the other company is better. And it was during this video package I just remembered how bad wrestling was at this point. Because you had Triple H doing the Reign of Terror on Raw, you had Jeff Jarrett doing the Reign of Terror on TNA, and the famous SmackDown 6, the quality of SmackDown is rapidly declining because you had Kurt Angle, Chavo Guerrero, and Edge all having months off due to injuries. And they were a big part of what made 2002 so great. And, you know, you end up with Zach Gowen, Stephanie McMahon, Vince McMahon, Sable, them all in matches with each other on a pay-per-view.
Mm-hmm.
I literally didn't really write anything about this interview. Did you?
I didn't care one bit whatsoever about this promo package. I zoned out. I wrote, okay, I probably should stop playing Binding of Isaac and focusing. So I continued to play more Binding of Isaac. The next segment, however, I was interested in. So
Tell
Tracy,
us about it.
Well, Tracy runs into Kid Cash. And she admits that she likes it rough and how he dropped her on her head and all that fun stuff. So Tracy plays coy. Kid Cash only thinks with his dick. Well, it makes sense because he is a dick. Lets down his guard. And Tracy gets some lotion, we'll say, and sticks it in Kid Cash's pants. Turns out the lotion was icy hot.
Well, it was Ben Gay, but it wasn't even in his pants. She rubbed over his tights, which I get tights are of a thinner material, but yeah. This really happened on this show. Kid Cash thought he was going to get jerked off, and instead they had rubbed Ben Gay on his dick. Why? Oh, and by the way, Kid Cash was throwing chairs all over the place, which made Goldilocks yell, "Act!" Is she now Kathy?
Goldilocks has done that ever since day 3 in this company. So I've kind of tuned that out.
Oh.
The next match
Anyway.
is David Young versus Chris Harris. What do you want to say about this match? Because I just didn't care.
So Sonny Siaki pulls on the top rope and Chris Harris flies out of the ring. Not only was this not a disqualification, but the referee just assumed that Chris Harris backflipped over the top rope on his own accord and threw himself into the announce table. This is my all-time example of making referees look really fucking stupid.
Mm-hmm.
Sonny then gave Chris Harris a Siaka lips in the ring, which, while at least this time the referee's back was turned, does make you question what did the referee think happened to Chris Harris, because when he last looked at Chris Harris was standing tall, and now he has fainted. If this was real, the referee would be like, hey, I need to administer first aid to this man who just fell down randomly. Siaki gets back into the ring for the second time with a chair this time, and the referee doesn't bother to do anything about it. James Storm runs in and drags Siaki away to the SEX locker room, where this time both Triple X and the Heresies beat up Storm. And by the way, this is the Heresies' 8th appearance on this show. On a positive note, Chris Harris pinned David Young. After the match, Chris Harris is wondering where the hell James Storm is, so he goes to the SEX locker room just as Sonny Siaki throws a bloody James Storm into him. This show is mind-numbing.
4 out of 10. Try better.
Glenn is still talking to Julio and Alexis. So what happened here is that Julio and Alexis never left the room while Glenn took his clothes off and put on his tights. They also, none of the three moved, budged, did whatever when the Heresies, Triple X, and Sonny Siaki dragged James Storm into the locker room, bloodied him up, and threw him out. This is just the day in the life of SEX, apparently. Anyway, Glenn wants them in SEX, which then leads to our semi-main event match of Main Event Glan Gilbertti with Julio and Alexis versus Perry Saturn. The fans were so into this that they chanted, "We want Raven." Saturn crotch disco on the top rope, which led both men to tumble to the floor in a big lump. While waiting for the interference that will undoubtedly end this match, I decided to go see what the last match was that didn't have interference, which was 7 matches ago last week with the Chris Harris-James Storm match. But like I said, we are now on a 7-match streak. Make that 8 matches as Alexis and Julio interfere a number of times, and Glenn wins with 2 stunners. Remember when I complained about how Raven and America's Most Wanted both looked like losers before big title matches? I know it is Glan Gilbertti, but if you're going to fucking put him in a world title match, you just have to fucking book him to look strong. Perry Saturn is not wrestling for the world title. He does not need to have multiple people interfere against him to be beaten. And if the problem is you don't think Glan Gilbertti should be beating Perry Saturn clean, then maybe Glan Gilbertti should not be wrestling for the world title on a pay-per-view main event in 3 weeks. We still have 3 fucking more weeks of this shit.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, this is the last time we will see Saturn in TNA for a while. Guess what he's doing?
Doesn't he disappear into the ether and no one knows where he is forever?
No, he's taking part in the New Japan Best of the Super Junior X Tag Tournament.
Perry Saturn is in the Super Junior Tag League.
Yes, he is.
It doesn't even make sense for a number of reasons. Isn't he All Japan?
No, Saturn is
Second.
New Japan.
This is why we need a Trey. This is why we need Trey in here sometimes, who's our Puro expert. Let me go here 1 second. Going into the Wayback Machine, 2003. Okay, he's on the tour, but I don't think he's in the tournament. 1 second. Yeah, because he's it's not the Super Junior Tag League. He's taking part in tag matches during the Best of the Super Juniors 2003. Yeah, and then he'll be back in time for the anniversary show, wrestling Kenzo Suzuki of all people, which apparently is going to be a real thing. That sounds horrifying. Just horrifying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And by the way, I already gave you the score for this match. I told you for 2 matches ago, last match and this match were all the same score. Kathy then interviewed AJ Styles and D'Lo Brown about their tag team title match. They plan on winning the belts tonight. And we get the only plug for next week, which is that Jeff Jarrett will be back. Now, there is actually a story as to why they never seem to plug anything. It's because Russo and Disco write the shows after this show ends, and then they give it to Jeff Jarrett, and Jeff Jarrett plucks it and edits it, and they get into fights all week about it. But that's why they don't actually announce anything in advance anymore. Because they don't know what they're going to do until 10 minutes after the damn show ends. Don't you love it?
Yeah, shows real forward thinking.
We then get our main event. World Tag Team Champions Triple X in their 7th appearance on the show, which end up being Christopher Daniels and Elix Skipper, who gets announced as weighing in at 247 pounds. I will bet you my left arm, Elix Skipper has never in his life weighed 247 pounds.
I think he got paid 247 pounds wrestling in England, but that's neither here nor there.
So we have a double team on AJ to get the heat. The referee ignores it and then runs at top speed to stop D'Lo from saving his partner. Low key interferes, so that makes it 9 matches in a row with interference. Daniels and AJ, I hope you're sitting down for this. Daniels and AJ work really well together. Imagine if these two were to wrestle one-on-one in a lengthy rivalry that goes off and on for like a decade. AJ caught Daniels and dropped him with a vicious powerbomb before making the hot tag to D'Lo, which breaks down into a 5-way because, yes, low-key is interfering in front of the referee, which is not a disqualification. AJ breaks out the Pele, and Styles wipes out 67% of his opponents by allowing D'Lo to backdrop him to the outside. D'Lo climbs to the top and dives outside of the ring onto the 247-pound Elix Skipper, when, of course, main event Glan Gilbertti runs down and gives AJ a fucked up Stone Cold Stunner. Believe it or not, it was not Glan Gilbertti's fault. It was actually AJ Styles' fault that move got fucked up. I'm sorry to announce that. And Daniels then covered AJ for the pin. This is another one of those things that you point to and ask to imagine how great TNA could be if it was booked by somebody competent. Triple X is your winner, 7.5 out of 10. And then, because we've gone 5 minutes without the Heresies run down, along with the rest of SCX, and they proceed to destroy the arena. And by destroy the arena, I mean they went backstage and beat up a bunch of office staff, Jerry Lynn and Amazing Red. The new church ran in, so it was now 9-on-7, heels advantage. And that was how the show ended, with main event Glan Gilbertti smoking a cigar and watching the carnage around him. Not sure how this means that they destroyed the arena. Anyway, I've had enough of Ron and Don Harris for at least the next 6 months.
And yet they're going to be around until forever.
And imagine when they almost ended up owning the fucking company at one point. You remember when that fucking shit happened?
Yeah.
I can't imagine it would have done any worse than fucking Dixie Carter was doing. Anyway, so match quality. Here's where it's a kicker. Because we had 2 great matches and we had those 3 matches of numbness where it was 4.0, 4.0, 4.0, we end up with a average match quality of 5.0, which is like on the high side of things when it comes to TNA. However, overall enjoyment, 1.5 out of 10. By the time the Heresies appeared on this show for the 5th time, I didn't care if the rest of this show was Kenny Omega versus Kazuchika Okada, Ricky Steamboat versus Ric Flair, and Steve Austin versus Bret Hart. I was bound to hate this show with a passion. Future build, 2.5 out of 10. They continue to book this show around main event Glenn Gilbertti as the top heel. At least we only have 3 more weeks left of this crap. And that gives us an overall rating of 3.0 out of 10.
I stopped caring. My last thing that I have written down here, after I saw the Carnage, I was like, okay, give me the thing now, Arya, so we can get this over with. And sure enough, once the show ended, there was the link in the chat. Fuck this show.
We still have what? This is 48, so we still have 63 to go, give or take.
No, this is only 46.
We still have 45 to go, or fucking 65 to go. This show is killing my ability to do math.
We're only halfway through Miserable May here. Let's see how far down the rabbit hole we go in bullshit.
Let me see here. So, what episode was this for us? This
40.
is episode 192 of something else. So in 4 TNA shows, it's episode 200.
So
Jared versus Disco Inferno was not our fucking 200th show.
No, I know what the main event of 200 is. Can I spoil it?
Okay. Nope. We'll cover that when we get to it.
All right.
For now, we'll just hope that a black hole opens up and the next 3 weeks of TNA disappear from the world.
Well, a
and
bitch
we
should be
never have
debuting
to talk
soon,
about them
so
again. Yippee-ki-yay, Melon Farmer. But, okay. So that does it for this week's show. And, yeah. So, anything else you want to tell us about video games or anything more interesting than TNA? Keeping in mind that speaking about a prostate exam would be more interesting than talking about TNA right now.
I'm really looking forward to my vacation in June.
Why did I come back from Las Vegas? Anyway, that's gonna do it for this week's show.
Because you wouldn't have wonderful times with your partner?
I just fly him out there. So that's gonna do it for this week's show. Thank you all for listening. I hope you all enjoyed it, and we'll talk to you again in 7 days.
We still love you, Tony Storm.